The Palm of the World, genre, ancient swordplay. Author, unknown. After listening, please comment on your feelings, and don't forget to subscribe to listen to the latest episode. Volume 1. Chapter 1. Phi Long Mountain site before the bloody battle. In the middle of the Phi Long Mountain yard, 7 old men wearing martial arts uniforms, with long swords strapped to their backs, stood in a horizontal line, their cold eyes looking straight at the gate. Behind are more than 200 disciples, warriors with swords drawn, ready to fight. Suddenly one of the 7 old men spoke in a deep voice. "Brother Dang, Hung Yen is an obscure gangster town, so is it afraid of the evil Thiat Hong gang? I vow to risk life and death with my friends." Another old man slapped the hilt of his sword. "That's right. Tonight, our brothers are determined to destroy old Van Nhat Tan and keep the Phi Long family treasure." The air inside and outside Phi Long Sun Trang was as tense as a guitar string. The heroes remained silent, waiting for the great bloody battle that was about to break out. The moon rises high. Suddenly, terrifying howls echoed from the old forest. Phi Long Home Page Dang Fo unsheathed his sword and shouted loudly, "Brothers, get ready, they're here." At that moment, a great man carrying a baby rushed out of the palace room, stood in front of Dang Fo, and shouted, "Master Trang, your subordinates are ready." Dang Fo waved his hand and said in a low voice, "Wang Jing, you must conscientiously protect the child Dang Kim Phi. Hurry up and leave, one step too late is too late." "Yes," Vong Kin replied, picked up Dang Kim Phi on his back, flew over the western wall, and rushed straight into the jungle. After running 5 or 6 miles, suddenly there was a loud laugh in the forest, then 12 big men rushed out to block the way. The guy holding the chain mace, his face fierce, roared, "Dog robbers! If you know anything, then give up and be tied down, otherwise I will tear your body apart." Vong Kin was startled and frightened. He quickly put Kim Phi on the ground and said quickly, "Young master, stand still here, your subordinates will kill them and then take you away." Vong Kin stepped forward to face the group of men and asked in a low voice, "Who are you?" The big man holding the hammer rolled his eyes and shouted, "I am Man Duk, Van Nhat Tan's subordinate, serving your arrest warrant." He pointed at Kim Phi. "Brothers, quickly tie up that boy, don't let him escape." The shout rang out and 4 figures rushed forward. Vong Kin shouted loudly, "Stop!" They all stopped. Vong Kin turned his head and said urgently, "Young master, quickly run away." But Kim Phi did not back down. The boy pulled out the short sword at his waist, stood close behind Vong Kin, turned around to guard against an enemy attack. Man Duk roared, "Top up!" He swung his mace straight down. Vong Kin waved his sword to welcome him, light flashed. The remaining 11 men immediately rushed forward, surrounding the 2 men in the middle. Suddenly there was a miserable scream. One guy was hit by Vong Kin's sword, blood spurted out and he fell to the ground. Right after that, another person screamed in pain and staggered back. Man Duk smiled faintly and took 2 steps forward. The left hand lifted slightly, the right hand pushed hard, making a whoosh sound. The chain hammer turned into a black light and rushed straight towards Vong Kin's chest. At the same time, another blade slashed horizontally, aiming straight at Kim Phi's back. Vong Kin was frightened, quickly took a step aside, avoiding the hammer's stance, and at the same time brought his left knife back to block the attack aimed at the child. His right sword slashed straight into the shoulder of the guy using the single knife. Kong! Kong! Sparks scattered. As soon as Vong Kin turned around, he heard a hissing whoosh sound and the hammer was aimed straight at his chest again. At that time, Vong Kin was sweating profusely, breathing heavily like a bellowing buffalo. While waving his sword to defend himself, he softly said to Kim Phi, "Young master, run away quickly." Having finished speaking, he swung his knife and slashed straight at the big man holding the single sword on his left. The opponent knew that Vong Kin's strength was not ordinary, so he quickly swerved to the left to avoid it. Taking that opportunity, Von Kin reached back with his left hand, grabbed King Fi's hand and pulled him away quickly. Suddenly a shout rang out, "Where to run?" Right after that, a hammer came from behind, aimed straight at King Fi's back. Von Kin was frightened, immediately pushed King Fi forward, and at the same time swung his knife and slashed hard at the chain of the mace. King Fi was pushed away, and Von Kin, because he was half a beat late, only heard a pop sound and shouted loudly, "Oh my!" A wooden stick hit him on the shoulder. Von Kin's whole body went limp. He staggered forward 2 steps before spitting out a mouthful of blood, and the sword fell from his hand. Immediately after that, he let out another huff sound. The chain hammer continued to hit his right hip, causing him to spit out another mouthful of blood, falling to the ground, still screaming weakly, "Run, run quickly. Damn. Oh wow." A cold blade from above slashed straight at Von Kin's neck. Fresh blood splashed. The loyal servant was surrounded by enemies and killed on the spot. King Fi stood dumbfounded, eyes wide open, tears falling freely. Suddenly, the boy raised his short sword and shouted loudly, "You guys quickly pay for my Uncle Vong's life." Having finished speaking, King Fi rushed forward. A big man saw this and sneered, "Little devil wants to die?" He swung his knife and slashed straight at King Fi's head. The boy took a half step forward, avoiding the sword position, then immediately stabbed the short sword straight into the opponent's stomach. The man did not expect that the boy knew martial arts. Being suddenly counterattacked by King Fi, he frantically struggled with his hands and feet, having to take several steps back to avoid the sword's position. The rest of the group saw this and laughed loudly. The man was so embarrassed that he became angry, his face turned red, and he cursed loudly, "Damn army!" He swung his knife, aimed straight at King Fi's shoulders and slashed down. Although King Fi was taught a few of the Fi Long Pitch Loi Thursday Night moves by Fi Long's homepage, he had never actually fought, and his experience was completely inexperienced. Another scene of a broken home and a broken heart makes my heart extremely painful. Seeing the sword coming, he gritted his teeth, pursed his lips, raised his sword and rushed forward to meet it. Just heard a resounding kung sound, swords and swords clashed strongly against each other. King Fi was shocked, staggered back 4 steps, his mouth was in severe pain. Suddenly the man holding the flying hammer turned his head to look at the village and said coldly, "Well, quickly end this boy's life." Before he finished speaking, he suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my!" He quickly covered his face and slowly squatted down, fresh blood continuously flowing from his fingers. The incident happened so suddenly that they were all stunned, not understanding what had just happened. At that moment, a faint laugh rang out in the forest. A figure rushed forward as fast as lightning. I only saw a dark shadow spinning around, followed by continuous, miserable screams. When he finished killing those guys, the black shadow stood next to King Fi. Before the boy could calm down, his back suddenly felt numb, his eyes darkened, and his body fell to the ground. In his daze, he could only hear the sound of the wind whistling in his ears as if riding a cloud, then his consciousness gradually disappeared, completely unconscious. Chapter 2. Golden Sword, Divine Sword. On the top of the towering hill stood 2 silhouettes, an old man with white hair and beard and an exceptionally handsome young man. No one knows when they appeared. Suddenly the old man spoke in a sad voice, "Sword Fi. For the past 10 years, I have practiced martial arts and am now an adult. Today is the day I descend the mountain and step into the world to find my identity and avenge my hatred. Master wishes you to complete your mission soon." The young man was King Fi. He knelt down with his arms folded, tears falling. "Master." The disciple asks for his life. The old man reached out and pulled out a cold blue sword, and at the same time gave him a secret. "Sword Fi. This is the Golden Arrow Divine Sword and the secret of Fantasy Tien Guen Fo. Take it with you, practice hard until it becomes refined, strong enough to confront your mortal enemy." King Fi received the 2 treasures, bowed deeply, then stood up, his voice choking. "Master, I'm going." He looked at the old man one last time, then turned and flew down the mountain. At that time, the sun had reached its peak. On the official path leading to Tringia village, a young man in a white shirt leisurely walked forward. That person was Kim Fai, who had just left Bat Ha No mountain in Jiangxi. Suddenly, the sound of horse hooves was heard from behind. Kim Fai turned his head to look back, saw two knights galloping and immediately moved aside. Two horses passed by, carrying a layer of sand dust that covered his body. Kim Fai raised his head, his eyes were angry. The two big men were dressed in military uniforms like foreign officials. When passing by, one of them turned around and glared at him, shouting, "Damn you, are you tired of living?" Before the words finished, the horse's shadow disappeared. Kim Fai raised his hand to brush off the dust and quietly continued to walk straight towards Tringia village. Arriving at Tringia village just after noon, Kim Fai felt hungry and immediately went to the big street and stopped in front of Trin Kai beef store. The fragrant smell of meat emanating from the shop made him crave it even more. The old man saw him standing there watching, so he quickly ran out and greeted him. "Customers are invited to come and enjoy our beef. Our delicious meat is famous throughout the city." Kim Fai walked in and saw that the shop was spacious but extremely noisy because of the large number of customers. He glanced around. Most of the diners were big men wearing martial arts uniforms. Everyone just bowed their heads to eat and drink or chat. Not many people paid attention to him. Not seeing an empty seat, Kim Fai was about to turn around when he suddenly saw a pair of bright eyes looking intently at him. He pretended not to notice and turned his face in another direction. The two men on horseback were sitting at a nearby table, including the one who had scolded him. Kim Fai looked up upstairs, saw that it was quiet upstairs, guessed that there were no customers, so he leisurely walked towards the stairs. Unexpectedly, as soon as he set foot on the step, the big man also stood up, pointed straight at his face and shouted, "Stop!" Kim Fai turned around and asked, "What's going on?" The big man immediately rushed forward to attack, but Kim Fai acted faster, punching him and making him fall to the ground. The barkeeper ran out in panic. "Objectively, please stop. I'm afraid you won't be able to handle this." Kim Fai raised his hand to point to the chair in front of him, invited the counterman to sit down, and asked with a bewildered face, "What does the shopkeeper mean by that?" The barkeeper lowered his voice and replied, "Those who objectively attack all have powerful people behind them. Today their young master hosted the entire party on this floor. In my humble opinion, it's better to leave early to avoid being seen." Kim Fai smiled faintly and thought to himself, what's the point of being a hypocrite? Telling me to leave quickly, just wanted to lure me to a deserted place to attack. Thinking so, he smiled and replied, "Thank you, shopkeeper, for your kind advice. I'll take care of it myself." Before he could finish speaking, the sound of bustling horse hooves could be heard from far away. The shopkeeper's expression changed slightly, but he immediately calmed down and asked with a smile, "Please objectively ask your great name?" Kim Fai did not answer, but instead asked, "What kind of person is their young master?" The shopkeeper burst out laughing. "Guests can sit and drink in peace. Everyone has to go downstairs to take care of business." Having finished speaking, he stood up and left the floor immediately. The sound of horse hooves outside the door of the tavern suddenly stopped. Not long after, loud footsteps rang out on the stairs. 9 middle-aged men appeared one after another, each dressed differently, walked straight to the table with bowls and chopsticks already laid out, and sat down. Foki immediately ran up to pour wine and serve him. Kim Fai squinted and observed, seeing that those 9 people had full expressions, sharp eyes, raised temples. Clearly they were all skilled martial artists. As soon as he sat down, a bearded man smiled faintly, looked at Kim Fai and shouted, "Baby, come here." Kim Fai still sat still, leisurely raised the wine cup and took a sip, then leisurely picked up the food and put it in his mouth, completely ignoring it. Seeing that attitude, the big man stood up angrily and shouted, "Baby! I called but you didn't listen?" Kim Fai coldly raised his head and glanced at him. The big man suddenly froze, his whole body shuddered, and his heart was secretly frightened. This kid's eyes, why are they so sharp? Seeing his arrogant face, the big man couldn't bear it anymore, so he picked up a pair of chopsticks, aimed them straight at his eyes, and threw them at him. King Fi just picked up the piece of beef he was about to eat, flicked it with his hand, and at the same time raised his chopsticks to gently brush away the enemy's chopsticks. Just hearing two pop sounds, his chopsticks flew aside and crashed into the wall of the building. The other guy saw the piece of beef rushing towards him and quickly dodged it, but strangely, the piece of meat about 2 meters away from him suddenly turned sideways and circled back like lightning. There was a loud pop sound, accompanied by a dangerous cry. It turned out that the piece of meat had hit him right in the mouth, blood dripping from the mouth. The big man with big eyes and thick eyebrows and gray hair and beard sitting next to him quickly stood up and shouted, "That kid is really good." He stomped in front of King Fi. As for the guy who was hit by the meat, he tried to spit out the piece of meat, 3 teeth fell out, and angrily pulled out his bright sword and shouted, "Brothers with the word hop in the black world, this young chicken dares to come here and disrupt the floor." He jumped forward, but before he could take a few steps, the bearded man overtook him, swinging his sword and rushing in. King Fi smiled faintly. "Do you want to die?" Having finished speaking, he suddenly stood up, turned behind the bearded man, raised his left leg and kicked him in the butt. He just said "oh wow" and fell to the ground. His martial arts skills were quite strong, but in front of King Fi, he was so ordinary. After being kicked once, he fell into the table and then shot more than 5 meters away, rolling around, his eyes rolling back, his mouth and nose spitting out blood like a stream. King Fi had just finished kicking when suddenly there was an overwhelming force behind him pressing down on his shoulder. He quickly squatted to avoid it, took 2 steps forward, then turned back, used his right hand to quickly grab the man's wrist, and forcefully pushed him forward. But when he saw his arrogant face, he couldn't bear it, so he picked up his chopsticks and closed his eyes and threw them at him. King Fi had just picked up a piece of beef to eat. Seeing this, he flicked it with his hand. At the same time, he raised his chopsticks and gently brushed away the enemy's chopsticks. Only 2 pop sounds were heard. The big man's chopsticks were knocked aside by his chopsticks and stuck deep into the wall of the building. The great man saw a piece of beef flying quickly and quickly dodged it, but strangely the piece of beef flew to a place about 2 meters away from him, then suddenly turned to the side and then circled back like lightning, with another loud pop sound, followed by a dangerous cry. It turned out that the piece of beef had hit the guy right in the mouth. Blood was dripping down both sides of his mouth. The big man with big eyes and thick eyebrows, gray hair and beard sitting next to him saw that and quickly stood up and yelled, "That kid is really good," he said as he loudly walked in front of King Fi. The guy who was hit by the piece of beef tried his best to release the piece of beef and 3 teeth fell out with it. He was indescribably angry and immediately pulled out his shining sword and shouted, "Brothers with the word hop, brothers in the black world, this young chicken dares to come here and knock the floor up to cause trouble. This is black magic slang. The idea is that this little guy dares to come to the door and cause trouble with us," he said as he jumped in front of King Fi. You had only gone a few steps in front when the bearded man passed by that guy and jumped out with his sword. Seeing that, King Fi smiled faintly and asked again, "Do you want to die?" Having finished speaking, he suddenly stood up, turned behind the big man, raised his left leg and kicked that guy's butt. The guy could only scream "oh wow" and immediately fell to the ground. That great man's martial arts skills were quite advanced, but he didn't understand why he was so ordinary in front of King Fi. He kicked him and fell onto the table, then shot out more than 5 meters away and fell to the ground. His eyes rolled back, his mouth and nose spit out blood like a stream. King Fi had just kicked that guy and suddenly there was a force behind him that overwhelmed him and pressed down on his shoulder. He quickly squatted down to avoid it and took 2 steps forward, then turned around and used his right hand to quickly grab the man's wrist and forcefully push it forward. The other person just huffed and staggered a few steps before standing firmly. The remaining 7 guys on the table all stood up, shouted loudly, pulled out their weapons and rushed to surround King Fi. He smiled faintly, still leisurely waiting for them to rush in to defend him, when a loud shout rang out at the top of the stairs. "Stop! The 7 men quickly stood still, not daring to move. Kim Phi looked out and saw at the top of the stairs a handsome young man, with a muscular body, wearing a yellow silk shirt. The young man walked over, looked at him for a long time, then clasped his hands and greeted loudly, "Dear Van Tik, just now I was rude to you, I hope you will forgive me." Before he could finish speaking, a strong wind suddenly hit Kim Phi's chest and pressed against him. He smiled and replied, don't dare, let Dang Kim Phi pass through this noble place." He put 5 tons of force into his hands, raised them in front of his chest and gently pushed, shooting that force back. Van Tik's face changed slightly and he staggered back a step. Kim Phi felt his blood boil, his body leaned to the side but his right foot only took half a step back. Comparing, everyone saw that he won by more than half a step. Van Tik laughed. "My brother's inner strength is really strong. I admit that I'm far behind. I'm very ashamed." He signaled his subordinates, "Quickly serve the food," then turned to bow to Kim Phi and invited, "Please invite Brother Dang to sit in the upper seat." Seeing his politeness, Kim Phi blushed and replied, Brother Van is so polite." At that time, Van Tik pulled Kim Phi's hand and invited him to sit on the throne, while he sat next to him and continued talking. After sitting down, Van Tik laughed loudly and said, "Please forgive me for what happened just now. I really want to make friends. Please don't refuse." Kim Phi smiled and replied, "Brother Van has said too much. Just now he was really heartless." Before he finished speaking, Van Tik quickly waved his hand and interrupted, "Please don't mention that again. It was my subordinate who started the trouble first, making Brother Dang angry." At this time, Fak Ki brought food and wine. Van Tik poured a cup for Kim Phi, then poured it for himself, raised the cup and said, "People living in this world will meet at some point. As soon as Brother Dang and I met, we hit it off. This cup of wine is considered an apology on behalf of my brothers, and I invite Brother Dang to finish the cup." Kim Phi was a bit embarrassed, raised his cup and lightly clinked it, smilingly replied, "Brother Van is so polite." The two of them drank together. Before long, Fo Ki brought more wine and dishes, and the atmosphere upstairs became lively. In particular, the more Van Tik and Kim Phi talked, the more intimate they became. Suddenly there was a pop sound. From outside the window of the tavern, an arrow flew and stuck deep into the door frame, accompanied by a piece of paper. Everyone immediately became silent. A great man came forward, took out the paper, respectfully brought it, and gave it to Van Tik. He took it with a serious face and opened it to see. Kim Phi glanced over and saw a few lines scribbled on the paper. "Kai Tu has arrived at Tam Jon Kao. Behind him is Du Kuok Ku, who is on the front line." Although the words were vague, Kim Phi immediately understood and thought, "This Van Tik is certainly not an honest person. Try to see which clan he belongs to. Maybe from here you can trace Van Nhat Ton's whereabouts." Van Tik finished reading, his face changed slightly, he stood up and clasped his hands to greet Kim Phi. "I have urgent business that needs to be taken care of immediately. If you have free time, I hope to see you again in Tam Jon Kao." Kim Phi also stood up and responded, "Brother Van, please feel free. We can meet again in Sanjiankou." Van Tik quickly led everyone to say goodbye to Kim Phi and left immediately. A moment later, from outside the door, the sound of horse hooves was heard, then fading away. Waiting for them to leave, Kim Phi leisurely went downstairs. The shopkeeper cheerfully ran over to welcome him, smiling and saying, the young master had told him that the Dang family was also family. "The villain has prepared a horse for the Dang family." Kim Phi humbly thanked him and walked out. Sure enough, under the tree in front of the door, there was a burly horse already saddled and waiting. He thanked the shopkeeper, jumped on his horse, spurred the horse and sped straight towards Tam Jon Kao. From Trinjia village to Tam Jon Kao, the mandarins have a smooth path. When it got dark, he was almost there. Looking around, Kim Phi saw that this area was deserted. Along the road were many deep ditches, and the distance was a dark forest. If there were people ambushing and looting, it would be extremely convenient. While thinking, suddenly from afar 2 knights ran as fast as flying, rushing straight into the forest. King Fi looked up and saw that the moon had begun to rise, so he spurred his horse to chase. Coming out of the forest, he saw that the other 2 had turned into a deep ditch in the middle of the wilderness. King Fi lay down on the horse's back and also rushed into the ditch. Suddenly, there was the sound of bustling horse hooves behind him. He knew that Van Tyck and his group had arrived, so he raised his head and urged his horse to escape into the ditch. Sure enough, there were more than 10 knights rushing forward. King Fi immediately bowed down and continued to spur his horse to run a little further, then saw a large rock ahead. He quickly jumped off his horse and hid behind a rock to observe the movements ahead. At that moment, a shrill whistle screeched, tearing through the lonely atmosphere of the late night. Chapter 3. Fighting for Millennium Ginseng. Under the shadow of a rock, King Fi hid and observed ahead. Suddenly, 2 gray shadows appeared from afar, as fast as falling stars. As soon as he touched the edge of the forest, he immediately disappeared. Before he could recover, another shadow appeared on the side of the road. Under the moonlight, he clearly saw that it was an old farmer riding an old donkey, leisurely moving towards the wild field. King Fi was surprised, not understanding how a rustic old man ended up here. When that person was less than 100 meters away from him, his appearance was clearly visible: dark skin, many wrinkles, thin gray hair, old and torn clothes. The old man held a pipe in his hand and smoked as he walked. The donkey was skinny, old, covered in mud, and looked very pathetic. Suddenly, a soft laugh rang out in the forest. A figure soared more than 3 feet high, circled in the air and then gently landed. Just a few steps, that shadow was right in front of the old farmer. The new person who appeared was about 40 years old, with a hooked nose, sunken cheeks, and wore a blue night shirt. As soon as he touched the ground, he clasped his hands in greeting and said, "Dai Hu Lai, this trip has made so much money, why don't you help the poor brothers?" The old farmer took a long drag of his cigarette, exhaled the smoke, and smiled and replied, "Teacher Chu said too much. This Lai Nia Tien has not made any fortune." Hearing that, King Fi shivered and thought, it turns out that Lai Nia Tien, famous in Ha Soc town, is an old country farmer like this. It's really easy to make a big mistake when you look at his face. While he was still thinking, the big man named Tu chuckled and continued, "Dai Heap Lai is right. This Tuong doesn't ask for anything else, just ask Dai Hu Lai to lend him a little to look at the 1,000-year-old king ginseng in his body, and that's enough." Having finished speaking, he chuckled twice again. Hearing the words Tuong, King Fi was startled and frightened. Unexpectedly, the infamous solo traveler from 10 years ago also appeared here. Looks like there will be an extremely exciting drama tonight. Lai Nia Tien stared at Tuong with wide eyes, laughed and said, "Teacher Chu misunderstood. The 1,000-year-old ginseng king is what Lai Nia Tien has longed for. Otherwise, why would I have to travel thousands of miles from the foreign manor to come here? Whether or not I have it in my body, I don't need to ask the teacher. On the contrary, if the teacher has that ginseng in his body, please bring it out for this old man to open his eyes. Maybe he can use it to cure his chronic disease." Tuong smiled coldly and replied, "Sir Lai, this Tu family is not the kind of person who grew up by swallowing the north wind. I hope the hero will think carefully." Lai Nia Tien smiled faintly, conveniently pulled the reins, urged the donkey forward, and mocked, "I'm sorry, Master Chu, I don't have time to talk anymore." Tuong chuckled, pulled out his pair of Fan Quan pens, and said, Dai Hu Lai refused to drink the wine offered to him, but liked the wine as punishment. It's hard to tell the truth. Today, if the hero doesn't put down the goods in his possession, I'm afraid he won't be able to get past Sanjiankou. Lai Nia Tien looked straight into his face and asked, "Is it possible that Master Chu decided not to let this old man come here?" Dai Hu Lai is a smart person. He just wants to get the goods. He doesn't mean to make things difficult for him. Lai Nia Tien did not answer, urged the donkey to turn diagonally to the side, and sped away. Tuong smiled faintly, raised his Fan Quan pen and stabbed it straight into Lai Nia Tien's sides. Lai Nia Tien turned around, his left palm gently pushed on the donkey's back, his body was thrown high, skillfully avoiding the two strokes. He laughed loudly and said, "Teacher Chu, if you can forgive someone, you should forgive them. Why do you keep forcing this old man?" Saying so, his hand was still not slow, the pipe word, aimed straight at Tuong's back and knocked down. Tuong saw that the attack was failing and quickly raised two pins to defend. Just hearing a kung sound, fireflies burst out, two bodies flew to both sides. Tuong's face immediately became extremely unsightly, because when he blocked the attack, the burning cigarette inside the cigarette splashed and fell all over his body. Lai Nia Tien smiled, clasped his hands in ceremony, and said, "Thank you, Master Chu, for your mercy." "That's a good idea," this old man acknowledges it. Having finished speaking, he threw himself onto the donkey's back. At that moment, a faint laugh and a cold voice rang out from afar. "That Lai family. There's another close friend that you haven't welcomed yet." As soon as the voice ended, a gray shadow emerged from the ditch and landed not far from Lai Nia Tien. Kim Fai clearly saw that person's thin, tall and slender body, his face covered with gray cloth, and his whole body wearing a gray martial arts uniform. Lai Nia Tien took a step back, raised his pipe horizontally, and asked in a hoarse voice, "Which faction do you belong to?" The gray-shirt man smiled faintly and replied, "When you meet a mountain, you eat thanks to the mountain. When you encounter water, you eat thanks to the water. When you meet the king of hell, you eat thanks to the little devil. Hee, if you know what to do, hand over that thing here." Having finished speaking, he held out his left hand demandingly. Tuong also took 2 steps forward, his eyes fixed on the confrontation. Lai Nia Tien clearly understood that he could no longer hide his secret, it was better to find a way to escape. But thinking about how difficult it was for his old life to be preserved, he looked up and smiled for a long time and replied, "Okay, my friends have taken care of me, how dare this old man not please me?" Before he finished speaking, the pipe was waved, aiming straight at 2 vital points in front of the gray-shirt man's chest. Almost at the same time, Tuong quietly deployed the pointing Tien Vac Dia position, the right hand pin stabbed into the acupuncture point under the spine. The left hand pin tapped directly into the back of Lai Nia Tien's head. The gray-shirt man did not expect Lai Nia Tien to suddenly attack. He just smiled faintly, turned around, raised 2 fingers of his right hand, and quickly pointed straight at Kuk Tri's opponent's acupuncture point. As soon as Lai Nia Tien launched an attack, he immediately stood on one leg and turned around, waving the pipe to point Tuong's Don. Acupuncture point. Tuong was startled and frightened, raised his right pin to flick the pipe, and his left pin stabbed down. Nia Tien smiled faintly and finished his cigarette, but halfway through he suddenly pushed away the Bok Hai acupuncture point under his thigh, and his left palm, as fast as lightning, slashed Tuong's shoulder. Tuong lost his composure. In an instant, the gray-clothed masked man made 2 consecutive attacks, both palms aimed at Nia Tien's back and swung down. As soon as Tuong retreated, Nia Tien humphed, his feet moved and he sneaked into the forest. The gray-shirt man chuckled and chased after him. Tuong shouted anxiously, "Where to go?" The voice echoed. Tuong shot after him, patting Nia Tien's back with his palm. Nia Tien sensed the strength behind him and turned around to defend. Bang! Because he was sitting on a donkey, Nia Tien lost his position and fell over. Tuong rushed forward and slapped his palm again. Nia Tien howled miserably and lay motionless, his skull shattered and he died on the spot. The other guy quickly searched his body. At the same time, the masked man cried whoosh because the stone hit him, grazed his left arm, tore his sleeve, and blood leaked like rain. Kim Fai did not expect Lai Nia Tien to die so quickly at their hands. He was about to jump out to take revenge, but thought better of it and decided to quietly observe the situation. Van Tik jumped into the ditch as fast as the wind. The tall gray-shirt man quickly said to the short, fat man, "I can't find that object on my body, so I won't look for it anymore." Having finished speaking, the two immediately turned around, followed the roadside ditch, and rushed away as fast as a falling star. Kim Phi knew that if he remained hidden at this time, sooner or later he would be discovered, so he turned around, jumped on his horse, and rushed out. Van Tik was in the ditch when he suddenly saw Kim Phi coming out from behind the rock. He was slightly surprised, then smiled and asked, "Brother Dang, did you see what those guys just took from the dead old man's body?" Kim Phi nodded slightly and replied, "I was suddenly curious, so I hid here to take a look." "Oh, they've gone far." At that moment, the two masked men disappeared. Suddenly Kim Phi pointed back and said, "Look quickly." Van Tik quickly looked back in the direction his finger was pointing, and sure enough, he saw two gray shadows pop up from the ditch, and in just a few steps rushed into the deep forest. He immediately said to Kim Phi, "Please wait a moment, Brother Dang, let me follow this direction and then come back soon." Before he finished speaking, the person rushed away, at the same time raising two fingers to his lips and whistled. After that signal, many people immediately appeared, each holding shiny swords, heading straight towards the jungle to chase the two masked men. After a while, Van Tik and the group returned tired. As soon as he approached, Kim Phi led his horse forward to welcome him and asked, "I wonder if Brother Van can get that thing?" Van Tik shook his head, looking sad. "They ran away. Do you know who those two people are?" Kim Phi asked. "Don't know." Both of them were masked, so they couldn't recognize them for a moment. "Ha, this trip really lost its brand." Kim Phi pretended not to understand, then asked, "Brother Van, what is a brand?" "The brand is the face, the reputation." "Did Brother Dang see the movements of those two guys clearly? I just feel confused." "It seemed like he knocked the old man down one after another, then searched for a while, took out a small bundle, and then left." "Do they say anything to each other?" "Have." "It seems they told each other not to show their faces." "I only vaguely heard that one sentence." Van Tik coldly snorted and muttered, "They can't escape our hands anyway." Hearing that, Kim Phi was slightly moved and thought, outside the foreign officials, the greatest force must be Van Nhat Tan. Is it possible that Van Tik is related to that person? After thinking about it, he asked, "Isn't Brother Van familiar with Van Nhat Tan?" "That's the family." "Could it be that Brother Dang?" Van Tik's face was full of surprise, as if he didn't expect that there would be someone who didn't know his identity. Kim Phi smiled and replied, "My younger brother has just stepped into the world and is still immature. I hope to receive guidance from Brother Van in the future." Van Tik laughed. "Brother Dang is so polite." Having finished speaking, he turned around and continued, "Let's go down and see the old man's body." Kim Phi nodded. The two handed their horses over to a great man standing next to them, then walked down the ditch together. On the ground, Lai Nia Tien lay face down, his skull was broken, blood was flowing freely, he died so tragically that he could not bear to look at it. Van Tik used his foot to turn the body upside down, bent down to examine it for a while, then sighed. Sure enough, it was stolen by them. "Hey, let's go." Kim Phi thought about the ginseng tree and looked at Nia Tien's tragic corpse, his heart suddenly filled with grief, silently praying, "If the old man is holy, please rest in peace. I will definitely avenge him." Then he turned to Van Tik and said, "Brother Van, how about we bury him by the way?" Van Tik looked at him and smiled faintly. Brother Dang has just stepped into the world, so he's probably not used to this kind of killing scene. Having finished speaking, he jumped up from the ditch and ordered his subordinates, "Quickly bury the body of old man Lai." Kim Phi followed Van Tik, holding the horse's reins in his hand, smiling and saying, "Thank you, Van, brother, for giving me the horse. In such a small matter, Brother Dang has no need to be polite." Later, my younger brother also asked Brother Dang for a lot of help. Brother Van has said too much. Suddenly Van Tik's face was serious and his voice was sincere. "As soon as I met Brother Dang, I felt like we were compatible, as if we had met too late. So I want to invite Brother Dang to stay at the dormitory for a few days. Don't you think so?" Hearing that, Kim Phi was secretly happy and thought, If I take this opportunity to follow him to investigate, maybe there will be a chance to avenge my father's revenge on Phi Long's son Trang. Van Tik saw him pensive, and knew that Keem Phi's martial arts skills were superior to his own as soon as he entered the world, so he wanted to entice him even more. So he smiled and added, "If Brother Dang doesn't have urgent work, please don't refuse." Keem Phi hesitantly said, "The first time we met, Brother Van gave me a horse and even invited my younger brother to come and disturb the farm. In my heart." Van Tik laughed loudly, patted him hard on the shoulder, and interrupted, "Okay, Brother Dang, stop being polite. Let's go." Having finished speaking, the two of them threw themselves onto their horses and rode along the official road like the wind. Chapter 4. Hour of Revenge. At the foot of the towering Lan Ha Dat, about 10 miles from Song Ha, stands a massive manor house. In front of the gate, there was a flagpole more than 4 feet high, hanging a simple flag, with a large swastika embroidered in the middle. The road in front of the door leads straight to the official entrance. This is the headquarters of the Thiat Hong Gang, also known as Quan Nguai Dan. The sun tilted to the west, the sand and dust on the road were cloudy. A dozen knights rode their horses and rushed to the manor. As soon as they arrived at the gate, the two leading men shouted loudly, "Young page master is here, ready to welcome you." The 2 doors opened. Everyone immediately dismounted, stood to the sides, hands hanging down, and looked respectful. From the large room behind, the door suddenly opened, dozens of well-armed men ran out, lining up in 2 rows to wait. Whoosh! An arrow soared and fell in the courtyard. Before long, the sound of bustling horse hooves could be heard from the Mandarin. 2 horses, one white and one red, approached side by side. On horseback were 2 handsome, muscular young men, Miss Van Tik and Dang Keem Phi. While chatting, they arrived at the gate. The soldiers bowed in unison. Van Tik nodded slightly in return, smiled and said to Keem Phi, "The dormitory is small and narrow. I hope Brother Dang doesn't laugh at it." Keem Phi quickly replied, "The manor house is so huge and grand, I have never seen anywhere comparable to the precious manor house." Saying so, in his heart he thought of the old Phi Long mountain site. Although it's not as grand as this place, the atmosphere isn't any less. The image of Phi Long Zich Loi's father Dang Pho appeared. He gritted his teeth and pursed his lips, silently praying, "Holy Father, please manifest your spirit to help Phi Ni take revenge." Seeing Keem Phi bowing her head in contemplation, Van Tik coughed softly and said, "This place is so dirty, it's really not worth." Dang Keem Phi quickly responded, "No, I just hope to stay here for a long time." Van Tik proudly laughed and continued, "If Brother Dang likes it, I wholeheartedly welcome it." Having finished speaking, he pushed his foot into the horse's stomach, accelerated the horse, and said, "Let's go and see home quickly." The 2 horses immediately galloped as fast as they could fly, and in the blink of an eye they reached the second door. There were also more than 10 armed men standing in front of them. Seeing the 2 of them, they immediately bowed their heads to pay respects. Van Tik put his hands on the saddle, gently threw himself off the horse, turned to Keem Phi and said, "Brother Dang, from here let's walk inside." Keem Phi nodded and jumped down. Immediately, a big man stepped forward and led the horse inside. The 2 walked side by side through the second door, heading straight into the inner courtyard. In front of our eyes appeared a large yard, lush green grass, hundreds of blooming flowers, lotus ponds, pavilions, small bridges, fake mountains, clear gurgling streams. The scenery was like a fairyland, making Keem Phi secretly admire it. Van Tik smiled proudly and said, "The family has put a lot of effort into this garden, sending flowers from all over to plant in all seasons. Brother Dang, do you think it's spectacular?" Keem Phi clicked his tongue and praised, "Not only spectacular, but absolutely beautiful." But in his heart he thought, "The scenery is truly wonderful, but unfortunately the owner is a dishonest person, wasting so many mountains, rocks, flowers, and grass." While he was thinking, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of him, tall and thin, with a gloomy face, bulging eyes, and sunken cheeks. That person came forward, greeted Van Tik and said, Missing home page, pending home page, missing home page. Van Tik quietly replied yes, then turned to Kim Phi and said, "This person is Hak Tai Vien Ha Phi, general manager of this site." Kim Phi quickly clasped his hands in ceremony and asked, "Is General Manager Ha healthy?" Ha Phi raised his left hand to invite guests and replied, "I don't dare, my lord, please come inside." Hearing that, Kim Phi suddenly remembered and thought, the masked person wearing a gray shirt, tall and thin, once reached out from Nia Tien to take a ginseng stick with his left hand, also his left hand. He quietly observed, and sure enough, Ha Phi's figure looked exactly like that person. Ha Phi glanced at him, smiled cunningly and quickly walked away. Van Tik smiled and said, "This site has two general managers, the last one is Ha Phi, and the other one is Phien's son Ho Tru Trin Tai. When we meet later, I will introduce them to you." Having finished speaking, the two of them arrived in front of a large building. Just looking at the outside, it was extremely magnificent. Step through the threshold and go inside. The floor is covered with thick sheep's wool. Take a few steps to reach the hall. The interior is as lavishly decorated as the royal palace. The furniture is entirely made of sandalwood, and both sides of the walls are filled with paintings of famous families and antique terrains. Van Tik smiled and said, "Invite Brother Dang to sit in the living room. I'll go into the inner hall for a moment and then come out immediately." Having finished speaking, he hurriedly entered the inner door. Kim Phi clasped his hands behind his back, leisurely walking around the hall, looking at the paintings and terrains, feeling a surge of emotion in his heart. My father-in-law also loved paintings and cross-stitches. Suddenly in the corner of the hall, he saw hanging a painting of the Eightfold Path. Ancient, strong brush strokes, 8 horses each with a different shape, lifelike. With just a glance, he immediately recognized it. It was the painting he loved most as a child, and had to beg his father-in-law to let him hang it in his room to admire day and night. Unexpectedly today, thinking about that, Kim Phi almost burst into tears. In his mind, the tragic scene of the Phi Long mountain site appeared in his mind, a sea of fire reaching the sky, pitiful screams, swords flashing, blood spilled. Those images seemed to appear right on the Bat Tuan Du painting, making him unable to hold back, tears silently falling. At that moment, footsteps were heard from inside. Van Tik happily walked over. Kim Phi quickly wiped his tears with his sleeve and forced a smile back. Seeing the strange look on his face, Van Tik asked in surprise, "Brother Dang, do you feel uncomfortable?" Kim Phi shook his head and replied, "No. I suddenly remember the scene where my parents were orphaned when I was young, wandering everywhere. My life was very sad, so I shed tears. I hope you will forgive me." Van Tik bowed his head in contemplation for a moment, then suddenly looked up and said, "If Brother Dang doesn't mind, I want to be sworn to Kim Lan with you, don't you think so?" Kim Phi was slightly surprised, then immediately replied with a serious face, "What Brother Van said really made me feel ashamed. I'm just a stranger. I'm extremely grateful to be treated like this by you. How dare you dream of forming an alliance? Furthermore, it's not certain that my father would reassure me to do so." After listening to Van Tik, seeing that his words were reasonable, he smiled and said, "Dad was very happy when he heard his younger brother mention you. He will come out to see you soon." Kim Phi's heart suddenly stirred. The leader of the underworld in the Foreign Office, his sworn enemy, was about to appear before him. Seeing that his face was somewhat tense, Van Tik thought he was afraid of his father's reputation, so he smiled reassuringly. "The father has always been very gentle towards his juniors, Brother Dang, don't worry." As soon as he finished speaking, laughter and a loud voice rang out from inside. "Tig Ni, you said that Thieu Heed Dang is this person?" Before he could finish his words, Kim Phi saw a muscular old man step out, lavishly dressed, with white hair and beard, and an imposing demeanor. Van Tik immediately stood up and respectfully said, "Father, this person is Dang Kim Phi." His sworn enemy stood right in front of him. Kim Phi's eyes were on fire, but he tried to suppress his anger and stepped forward, clasping his hands and bowing. Junior pays homage to uncle. Van Natan laughed loudly and replied, family members and siblings do not need to be too formal. Please sit down, sir. Then he turned to Van Tik and said, Tik me, quickly order the kitchen to prepare rice and water for the guests. Van Tik quickly accepted his orders and quickly walked inside. Van Natan looked intently at King Fai for a moment, silently thinking, this boy is truly a dragon among humans. If he honed more, he would become a tyrant one day. Luckily Tigni brought him here, otherwise if he fell into someone else's hands, the consequences would be unpredictable. After thinking about it, he smiled and asked, Dang Thu Heap, I heard Tigni say that Tigni often wanders around, is that true? Kim Fai knew that this old gangster must be very suspicious, so he quickly replied, the junior has not been in the world for long, his knowledge is shallow, he hopes Van Ba can teach him more. Van Natan laughed, since we are a family, there is no need for a young knight to be polite. Ah, what sect does the young knight belong to? Who is the master? Can you tell me? Kim Fai respectfully replied, the tutor was a hermit who lived in a deserted mountain. He never mentioned any sect, and didn't even tell his juniors his name. Van Natan softly said oh, showing surprise, then immediately changed his expression, smiled and asked again, so where is the young knight's hometown? Kim Fai sadly replied, even now, the juniors still don't know. I only heard from my teacher that the junior was an illegitimate child, whom he met by chance and brought him back to raise and educate him until he was an adult. Really? So does the young knight have a fellow monk? As far as the junior knows, the tutor only accepts the junior. Van Natan flashed a doubtful look, but immediately hid it, smiling and saying, from now on, the young knight is a family member, no longer as polite as before. Although Kim Fai is agile, the wanderer is still inexperienced. Even though he skillfully hid his background just now, he still unintentionally sowed seeds of suspicion in the other person without realizing it. A moment later, Van Tik came out to invite him to dinner. Van Natan smiled and stood up to go first. Kim Fai and Van Tik followed. After eating, Van Natan returned to the room to rest. Van Tik chatted for a while longer and then took Kim Fai to a small, isolated building in the yard to rest. It was late at night, everything was quiet. The bright moon slowly rose in midair. Kim Fai sat against the door of the building, contemplating a plan for revenge. Thinking of the excitement, he smiled slightly, stood up and looked around the upstairs. Seeing that there was no one, he gently closed the window. He took the Kim Hut Divine Sword, Fantasy Tien Gwen Spectrum and the 1,000-year-old ginseng tree, tied it close to his body inside his shirt, wearing only his undershirt and short shirt. Overcoat and luggage left on the table. After that, he sat cross-legged on the bed, practiced internal exercises for a while before lying down to rest. As the second watch clock ticked, a dark shadow glided over the edge of the large floor and then gently jumped to the small floor where Kim Fai rested, lying on the porch, exploring inside. The window was closed. The man pulled out a dagger, gently pried. The door slowly opened, without making a sound. He still lay still under the eaves and looked in, seeing Kim Fai sleeping, breathing steadily, clearly asleep. Under the moonlight, his body was chubby, his face covered with a black scarf. After observing for a while, he gently pressed his hand on the tile roof and slid into the building. The movements show that the left arm is somewhat clumsy and inflexible. He tiptoed to the table, picked up Kim Fai's white AO die and searched but found nothing. Immediately walked quickly to the bed, using 2 fingers to touch Kim Fai's sleeping point. All those movements could not escape his eyes. As soon as the other person's hand touched, Kim Fai turned around and grabbed his wrist, softly shouting, "My friend, I'm not Lin Ye Tian, why do I have to be so secretive?" The man shivered, immediately withdrew his right hand, and his left hand immediately touched the Tian Tin point on his shoulder. Kim Fai leisurely increased the strength in his hand and calmly continued to ask, "Have our friends forgotten what happened in Sanjiankou?" As soon as his left hand was extended, that person felt his right wrist numb, his whole body was weak, he had no strength left, so he replied in a trembling voice, "Young Master Deng, please forgive me." Kim Fai coldly asked, "Haven't asked for a noble teacher yet?" While the masked man was still hesitating, Kim Fai used his strength to tighten his grip and said in a low voice, "Are you willing to tell the truth?" The blood in that person's body immediately became chaotic. It felt like countless ants were crawling throughout his veins. He felt numb and uncomfortable, and he sweated profusely. He gritted his teeth and replied, his voice trembling, "This is True Trin Tai." Thieu He Deng. Kim Fai softly said, "Oh, Deputy General Manager?" "So who sent the Deputy General Manager here?" When True Trin Tai heard that question, he felt a little less tense and immediately replied, "Home page." Kim Fai coldly asked, "So why do you act arbitrarily in Sanjiankou?" True Trin Tai rolled his eyes, thought, then replied, "That's my personal business, the young knight doesn't know." Kim Fai smiled faintly, "Oh, then let me ask Miss Trang's owner to see what the end is like." True Trin Tai quickly said, his voice urgent, "Young Master Deng, we are all poor wanderers. If young master will help me a little, I will definitely repay you in the future. Otherwise, even if you try to force him to ask more, you won't get any benefit from him." Kim Fai said in a low voice, "Photon Quan, Nu Tai Ha the Photon Quan Di, Hu, Long Nuoi Ko Luong, Beat Dao Photon Quan Lai Kui Ve Truoc Mat Trang Chu Boi Za Tai Ha." True Trin Tai, who was an experienced gangster, was startled when he heard that and quickly replied, "Mo True Trin Tai has always said that 1 is 1, 2 is 2. Deng Thieu Heap just asked Thieu Trang's master and it will be clear." Kim Fai heard that, pondered for a moment, then softened his voice and said, "Deputy General Manager, I want to ask one more thing." "What? In your gang, is there anything you can use to prove your identity?" "In the clan, each person has a card proving their identity." Kim Fai continued asking, "What if I don't bring my card?" "That cannot happen. Your identity card must be carried with you at all times." Kim Fai nodded. "Very good. So now how can I prove that my friend is really the Deputy General Manager? And how to prove that the Deputy General Manager was indeed sent by the home page?" True Trin Tai reached into his left-hand pocket, took out a round iron card, and gave it to Kim Fai. "This is an identity card." Kim Fai glanced and saw clearly engraved on the card, Tai Hong Bang Quan Nguai, Deputy General Manager of the group. After reading, he held the card in his hand, smiled and said, "Okay then, please keep this card in my possession for now." True Trin Tai was startled and quickly said, "Young Master Deng, this." Kim Fai's face darkened and his voice deepened. "If the Deputy General Manager does not agree, let's go see the home page together." Reluctantly, True Trin Tai sighed. "If the young knight doesn't believe in this true family, I have to give up and let the young knight handle it." Kim Fai replied calmly, "It's not that I don't trust the Deputy General Manager, it's just that both sides are unfamiliar and have to do this. I hope the Deputy General Manager will understand." Having finished speaking, he turned his left hand, gently patted the other person's pulse and continued, "Deputy General Manager, I have used a specific technique to hit the vital point. If the Deputy General Manager does not object, we will go out to the site for a walk around tomorrow afternoon. Otherwise, if it's past noon, it will be difficult for me to save you in time." True Trin Tai was so angry that he gritted his teeth and silently cursed. "This kid, I didn't expect that True Trin Tai would lose to you, an old fox caught in a lamb's trap." Thinking so, he replied, "Okay, I'll listen to you, young master." Kim Fai added, "In front of the home page, I hope the Deputy General Manager will help me with a few words, so it will be easier for both sides." Having said that, Kim Fai suddenly waved his right hand out, sat up at the same time, and continued, "Deputy General Manager, go. It's best to pretend that nothing happened tonight." True Trin Tai was pushed back a few steps before standing firmly, his face gloomy, and he replied softly, "Young Master Deng, I would like to take my leave." Suddenly, light footsteps were heard outside. Kim Phi immediately raised his hand to signal Tru Trin Tai to leave quickly, and at the same time lay back on the bed, pretending to be fast asleep. Tru Trin Tai did not dare to hesitate, glanced at Kim Phi angrily, then turned and jumped out the window, disappearing into the night. As soon as he left, Van Tik's voice was heard outside the door. Brother Dang, Brother Dang. Kim Phi yawned and drowsily asked, "Who is there?" "Brother Dang, did you hear any movement?" "A foreign invader has just been detected on the site." Kim Phi quickly sat up and pretended to be surprised. "What? Are there foreigners? I don't see anyone coming here." "Brother Van, wait a moment while I open the door." When he said that, in his heart he secretly laughed coldly. "Humph, don't try to play this childish trick with me." Van Tik smiled and replied, "There's no need to open the door. I'm just worried about Brother Dang, so I came to ask." "Well, see you tomorrow." Having finished speaking, he turned away. Kim Phi breathed a sigh of relief, sat up, closed the window, made arrangements, and then returned to bed. He silently prayed, "Father, Kim Phi has begun the path of revenge. Please bless me." Praying several times, he gradually fell asleep without realizing it. The next morning, the sun had just risen, and the birds in the trees were chirping and calling to each other. In the dense forest not far from Van Gia Trang, two figures leisurely walked side by side. One is a handsome young man wearing a white Ao Dai, the other is a boxer with a fat body, moderate build, gloomy face but dressed in extremely luxurious clothes. The two quietly went deeper into the forest, arriving at a thick reed bush next to a pile of jagged rocks. Looking around, seeing no one, Tru Trin Tai led Kim Phi into the pile of rocks, smiling and saying, "Young Master Deng, this place is the most private. If you have anything, just say it directly." Kim Phi looked around and saw that all around were ancient trees so large that two people couldn't hug them. Behind them was a pile of rough rocks that were easy to hide in. Hard to notice from the outside, it was a secret place. But in his heart he was secretly wary. This place is not only convenient for hiding, but also very convenient for killing people. "You have to be careful." Thinking so, he said, "This place is really tight." It seems that Deputy General Manager Tru is very familiar with the terrain around here. Speak and then look straight at the other person. But Tru Trin Tai is inherently a master of black magic outside of the outside world, with deep cunning, so it is not easy for others to probe. Y smiled softly and replied, "The terrain around the farmhouse is well understood." "How long has the Deputy General been here?" "It's been about 12 or 13 years. Kim Phi nodded. So the Deputy General Manager must have clearly understood the situation of martial arts outside this foreign official. Tru Trin Tai replied, "It can be said that I know all of my friends in the martial arts world." Kim Phi smiled. "If so, that's great. I have just stepped into the world and my experience is still shallow. I hope you will give me more guidance in the future." When Tru Trin Tai heard him say that, he secretly thought, "This kid is not simple. He is so young yet he is so experienced and profound in his actions." Thinking so, he still quickly smiled and replied, "Young Master Deng has said too much." Kim Phi continued, "Deputy General Manager Zhao, I have a friend who asked me to help him deliver an envelope to one of his relatives. That person is currently at Phi Long Mountain site and is said to be a captain under Phi Long Pitch Loi Thursday. But I don't know where Phi Long Mountain site is. The general manager is familiar with all the roads and paths besides the foreign officials, so he must know." Tru Trin Tai hesitated for a moment then replied, "I know, but what?" Kim Phi asked urgently. "Phi Long Mountain site has been destroyed." "Destruction?" Kim Phi was startled. "So where are the people in the village?" "After the mountain site was destroyed, everyone was killed." "For what reason?" "Because they were so stubborn, everyone risked their lives to resist." So, hearing that, Kim Phi's heart ached, but he still tried to remain calm and continued asking, "Does Phi Long Sun Trang have a grudge against anyone?" "Not at all. Just because the leader of the Thiat Hong gang ordered the master of Van Trang to force them to submit." in order to unify the martial arts outside the foreign officials. Who is the leader of your clan? Tai No, chasing the soul of the king of hell, Tai Ta Fong. In the destruction of Fai Long Sun Trang, who else was involved besides Trang? Tru Trin Tai looked suspicious, glanced at him and asked in a low voice, "What does the young knight mean by asking?" At this moment, Kim Fai was extremely angry, his murderous aura rising. He coldly replied, "No need to ask much. General Manager Tru just needs to tell his subordinates the directions and how to arrange the guard tower in the site." When Tru Trin Tai heard that, he was startled and frightened, thinking in his heart, "I'm afraid this kid has been lying here for a long time." Even though he thinks so, he still has to worry about his own life first. Furthermore, Hao Fai is hiding behind a pile of rocks. As long as the other party releases his acupressure, everything can turn around. Kim Fai saw Tru Trin Tai rolling his eyes and thinking, so he smiled and continued, "Manager Zhao no longer needs to calculate. If you still regret your life, it's best to tell this clearly to this subordinate." Tru Trin Tai chuckled a few times and then replied, "Young Master Deng, please release my acupuncture points first. Besides, a young knight who uses this trick to intimidate is not worthy of being a hero. To put it bluntly, if you are determined not to say anything, there's nothing you can do. If the general manager refuses to open his mouth, I will have to invite the general manager to taste Pan Can Thack Thack Chow 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 Soul Hand." As soon as he heard those 7 words, Tru Trin Tai shivered in horror, his face turned pale. He stared at Kim Fai and stammered, "Is the young knight a member of Thuan Quan Bao, or Black Sat Trang?" Seeing the other person so panicked, Kim Fai was also surprised, so he smiled and asked, "Why did the general manager think that I came from Thuan Quan Bao or Black Sat Trang?" "Young hero, in the world, only people from Thuan Quan Bao or Black Sat Page know Pan Can Thack Thack Tao Tao Soul Hand. Oh, where are Thuan Quan Bao and Hak Sat Trang? Ah? Have you never heard of people talking about Nam Trang Bak Bao? Not yet. Those are the 2 headquarters of 2 great guilds that have emerged in the last 10 years in the dark world." In fact, Kim Fai knew clearly about Nam's disguise and Bak's treasure, but deliberately pretended not to know so that the other person would be less suspicious. He leisurely continued, "General Manager Zhao, why has the general manager not answered my questions until now?" Yeah. Tru Trin Tai pondered for a moment, then asked seriously, "If I tell you, will you dare to guarantee my safety?" Hearing that, Kim Fai thought to himself, the blood of the Phi Long Mountain site, this Tru Trin Tai definitely has a share. How could I let him escape? Having decided to kill the enemy, he coldly replied, "Even I myself am not sure that I am safe, so how can I guarantee the general manager?" At that time, Tru Trin Tai clearly understood that the other person was not ordinary, and his life was already difficult to protect. Reluctantly, he nodded. "Okay, let me tell you." Having finished speaking, he took a few steps forward, picked up a dry branch, squatted down and continued, "Young hero, look here. This is the second door of this site." As he spoke, he drew on the ground the shape of a wall, with a door in the middle. Kim Fai listened and thought to himself, being threatened by me like this, even if he says it, it may not be true. Thinking so, he took a step forward and said, "General Manager Tru, let me solve the acupuncture point for the general manager." Tru Trin Tai was happy to hear that and tried to act calm to avoid revealing his suspicions. But the deceitful smile still could not hide the intentions in his heart. Why quickly said, "Thank you, young master." Kim Fai raised his right hand, lightly struck 2 palms at his 2 vital points, making 2 pop sounds. Suddenly, Tru Trin Tai coughed loudly, spitting out a thick sputum. He secretly tried his luck and saw that his limbs were moving as usual, and he was secretly happy. He immediately took a step forward, bowed his head to Kim Fai, and said, "Thanks. Thank you, young master." Before he finished speaking, his right hand flashed, holding a dry tree branch and stabbing it straight into the vital point below Kim Fai's navel. His mouth curled into a small smile and he coldly said, "Hey kid, thank you too." The 2 people were only about 3 meters apart, but he acted extremely quickly. As soon as he finished speaking, the tip of the tree branch touched King Fi's stomach. Chapter 5. Murderous Intent. King Fi had just dodged to the left when he heard the wind move and immediately knew that the weapon was secretly slashing across his back. He was startled, jumped up and jumped higher than the staff. Tru Trin Tai shouted softly, "Let's rush forward and destroy him first." He pulled out a 7-piece cast iron whip and lashed King Fi's legs. He smiled faintly. "Very good. General Manager Van Jia Trang is good at receiving guests, isn't he?" He bent his back in the air, bent his legs to immediately avoid the whip. At that time, Ha Fi's demonic knife slashed at him. King Fi shouted lightly, raised both hands and struck 2 palms at the heads of the 2 enemies. Ha Fi and Tru Trin Tai shouted at the same time, one wielding a knife and the other wielding a whip to aim for King Fi's vital point. In the blink of an eye, King Fi penetrated into the light and shadow of the knife and whip, and acted as fast as the wind to counterattack the crowd's acupuncture points. After 10 rounds, the 2 enemies were unable to defeat each other. Ha Fi swung his knife to slash his left shoulder, Tru Trin Tai whipped his right hip. King Fi smiled faintly, shrugged his left shoulder. His right hand was as quick as electricity to tap Ha Fi's left hand. His right foot kicked Tru Trin Tai. Speak slowly and act quickly. He changes 3 forms, claps 4 palms, kicks 3 feet. Oh my! Huh! Next, clang, the demon's knife head and 7-piece whip fell to the ground. Ha Fi shouted, "This guy is very tough, let's get away." Both of them danced their fists forward. Tru Trin Tai used his palms like a storm to dominate. King Fi smiled faintly. "Don't try to escape." He immediately launched 2 great martial arts stances, both hands attacking the 2 enemies. Ha Fi shouted in horror, "Long Feng double strike." He retreated, raising his palms to block. Boom 2 times, followed by oh wow 2 more times. Ha Fi and Tru Trin Tai were beaten 2 feet away, fell to the ground, their mouths, noses and ears were bleeding, and they died immediately. King Fi was surprised by the power of Long Feng's 2 great palms, and just one move, he destroyed 2 top martial arts masters. If he had known sooner, he would have preferred to visit Trang directly. He pondered for a long time in the forest, deciding on a plan, use extremely quick methods to destroy Van Jia Trang, then quickly return to Trung Nguyen to eliminate Ta Fong, the main culprit. Having made his decision, he picked up the knife, dug a large hole in the grass, searched the 2 corpses for a set of keys, a full map of the path and the guard tower, and threw the corpses to cover the ground. To hide the fight, he straightened his clothes and leisurely walked out of the forest. Returning to Van Jia Trang, the family reported, "Dang Thu Heap. Missing home page looking for a young knight." King Fi smiled and replied, "Oh, I know. He went straight on the main road." Van Tik smiled and walked out. "I'm looking for you to go eat." "Where are you going, Mr. Dang?" King Fi laughed. "Let's go for a walk, little brother." He followed him into the dining room, thinking to himself, Van Tik is very good. He was still young when the blood washed Phi Long Sun's makeup. Don't kill him later. Then he thought, but if you don't kill him, he will take revenge later. However, seeing that Van Tik was kind, he thought that killing him was too cruel. When eating, Van Nhat Tan was not sane, only Van Tik and King Fi were eating. That afternoon, King Fi invited Van Tik to the room to chat. The 2 sat down. He smiled and asked, "Brother Van, who dared to attack the noble manor last night?" Van Tik hesitated and replied, "Last night, I noticed many people intruding, but I couldn't find it." King Fi said, "Oh," pretended to think and then asked, "On the day of Tam Jong's death, did Brother Van pay attention to the appearance and special traces of the gray-shirt man?" Van Tik smiled shyly. "I only remember that he was tall and thin, but I didn't pay attention to the rest." King Fi asked, "Brother Van, do you find him familiar?" Van Tik was startled and serious. Brother Dang found out who was suspicious. "I just feel a little familiar." King Fi said solemnly, Brother Van, do you remember what the guy in the gray shirt said to Linnea Tien and then raised his hand to take the things? Which hand? Looks like left hand. It seems like they don't want to meet Brother Van. Van Tik was serious and asked softly, what does that gray shirt guy look like? Kim Phi thought about it and then replied. He was a bit short and fat. His left arm was hit by a stone thrown by his younger brother. Van Tik shivered slightly, lowered his voice and said, did Brother Dang see that person in disguise? I'm just skeptical. Who does Brother Dang suspect? Brother Van, have you found anyone suspicious on the site? Van Tik pondered for a moment and then replied, Brother Dang, we are all family members. Please tell the truth. Just because of this, my younger brother has been scolded by his family many times. If you don't mention it, I'll forget it too. Indeed, I also suspect that the gray-shirt man looks a lot like Manager Ha. Kim Phi nodded and continued. This morning, the younger brother came out from behind, intending to go up the mountain to practice, when he happened to meet the deputy general manager of the Noble Manor. His body was identical to the second gray-shirt man. The little brother immediately noticed his left arm, and sure enough, he looked awkward, so he became suspicious. Although the two general managers are both of high status in the farm, not ordinary people, so I don't dare to make random assertions, but I also don't dare to hide it, so I invited you here to discuss. Van Tik nodded vigorously. When you said that, I also confirmed that it was those two guys. Brother Dang, follow me down to meet my father. Kim Phi smiled. No, I need to rest for a while first. Van Tik's face darkened and he quickly stood up. Brother Dang, I'll go away for a moment and I'll be right back. Kim Phi asked, Brother Van, do you have to go see your uncle? Van Tik replied in surprise. Only parents can handle this. Kim Phi pondered for a moment and then said, I'd rather Brother Van try and see if I can get that thing. Van Tik thought and replied, the position of general manager in the manor is very high. The younger brother is afraid that it will be difficult to do things alone, so he does not dare to act on his own. According to my brother's assessment, they had prepared in advance. Van Tik bowed his head to think, then said, Please wait a moment, little brother. Having finished speaking, he hurried downstairs. Kim Phi muttered, Tonight I hope that person is not present. At the same time, he was also sure that Van Tik would not stay tonight. Not long after, Van Tik hurriedly returned upstairs and angrily said, Brother Dang's guess was right, those two guys had secretly escaped. Kim Phi coldly glanced at him and did not answer. Van Tik continued, Brother Dang, please rest, tonight I swear I will take them back to question them. Kim Phi asked, How can Brother Van guarantee that he can catch them? Van Tik shook his head. That doesn't matter. Although the world is big, there is nowhere that can stop the Thiat Hong gang from investigating, so how can they escape? Having finished speaking, he stood up to greet Kim Phi. Brother Dang, just treat this place as your home. If you need anything, just ask. I will go catch those two guys and return immediately. Brother Van, I would like to take your leave. No way, no way. Anyway, Brother Dang has to wait for his younger brother to return. Kim Phi thought for a moment then nodded. Van Tik left. Kim Phi told Din to bring him dinner upstairs tonight. Upstairs, he pondered for a moment and then took out a prepared greeting card. The postcard is about 1 meter long, 3 inches wide, and in the upper corner is a drawing of a Kim Huk divine sword 3 inches long and 2 inches wide. He picked up a pen and wrote on his business card, At the third watch of this night, we will collect the debt of Phi Long Mountain site. Below the greeting card is signed, Master Kim Huk. At that time, it was still late afternoon, the sun had not yet set, and most of the people on the site had not yet rested. Kim Phi went downstairs to look around, but when he couldn't see anyone, he used Long Van Dong's light attack, turning into a white shadow and rushing straight towards the main building inside the manor. Arriving in front of the door, he put on Long Fong Quang, raised his hand and gently pressed the middle of the door. The card was immediately pinned to the wood, sinking about 2 centimeters deep. Having finished, he returned upstairs, a feeling of tension rising in his heart. 2 consecutive days of investigation showed that no one on the page had martial arts skills that surpassed his. But if something goes wrong, I'm afraid he will die in vain, carrying with him an unrequited grudge. Thinking about the killing scene tonight, Kim Phi hesitated for a moment, but as soon as he remembered the tragedy at Phi Long Mountain site, his anger flared up again, clenching his teeth. This is just the beginning of the revenge. Thiat Hong Gang's subordinates are scattered everywhere. His responsibility is still heavy. If you come to a small Van Jia Trang and still don't dare to take action, then what will you do in the future? He thought to himself, I still have a grudge against my master. Thuong Quan Hung and Tran Tin, my master's sworn brothers, are now strong in Nam Trang, Bac Bao, a treasure lord, a manor master, famous in the world. Soon it was completely dark. After eating and drinking, Kim Phi leisurely went to the back of the mountain to admire the scenery. Suddenly, I saw a strong man running as fast as the wind. He leaned into the ear of the man downstairs and gave him a few words before leaving. Kim Phi silently thought, they must have discovered my concubine. Sure enough, not long after, bustling footsteps were heard down the stairs. A handsome man stepped up and respectfully greeted. Young Master Dang, the home page told young master not to leave this building for now, if he hears any movement later. Kim Phi chuckled hearing that, pretending to be surprised on the outside. Did something happen on the page? Trang Din shook his head. The poor man did not understand this matter, he only obeyed orders to pass on the word. Okay, many thanks. Trang Din immediately retreated. Night fell, stars sparkled all over the sky. The moon just rose high. That night, Van Jia Trang was much more tense than usual. Watchtowers and ambushes were carefully arranged. In the hall, Van Nat Tan was already wearing his martial arts uniform, frowning and sitting on a pink wooden chair. Next to the table was placed a snake golden bagua knife, and front were several big men standing solemnly. Van Nat Tan just bowed his head and sat quietly, not saying a word. Suddenly Van Nat Tan raised his head and said in a deep voice, no matter what, tonight we must capture the enemy, no matter how much sacrifice we have to make. Everyone respectfully agreed. Van Nat Tan chuckled a few times. Well, everyone go back to your positions. Before long, the hall was left with only 2 middle-aged men standing guard on both sides of him. Time passes slowly. The torchlight all over the site was as bright as day, and the experts were all hidden in guard towers. In the hall, the faces of Van Nat Tan and the 2 guards became increasingly tense. The first hour passed, the whole page was as quiet as paper. Van Nat Tan felt even more burdened. He began to suspect that the avenger was Kim Phi, because the owner of Phi Long Mountain Village was named Dang. However, he still did not believe that Kim Phi could possess such profound internal strength that the concubine's pin would sink more than 2 inches deeper into the door. That person's power is truly sublime beyond imagination. Aside from the officials, except for a few villains who have been famous for a long time and whose whereabouts are uncertain, I'm afraid no one is capable of resisting. Suddenly Van Nat Tan turned and told the big man behind him, quickly release the dove to bring news to the general altar. At the same time, prepare a few. Whenever the other person appears, observe their appearance and age, immediately record it, tie it to the bird's leg, and quickly transmit it to the altar master. An uneasy feeling rose in his heart. Van Nat Tan held the business card on the red wooden table, looked at it and muttered, for more than 100 years, the divine sword Kim Huk has never appeared in the world again. If that sword appears here tonight, I'm afraid. Knock, knock. The second watch of the gong rang out, and the sight became even quieter. The great man standing to the right of Van Nat Tan spoke. Master Trang, I'm afraid that kid is scared and doesn't dare come anymore. Before Van Nat Tan could answer, a cold, deep voice rang out from outside the door. I have never broken an appointment before. Van Nat Tan was startled and turned his head, only to see a young man with an unusually handsome appearance but a chillingly cold expression, wearing a white AO dye. That person is Kim Phi, a guest of the young master. As soon as they saw Kim Phi appear, all 3 of Van Nat Tan were stunned. On the one hand, he did not expect that the person who came to take revenge was Dang Thieu Heap. On the other hand, he was even more panicked because Kim Phi had entered the guest room at some point without their knowledge, enough to see how sublime his light work was. Kim Phi stood still like a stone statue, her face cold, her eyes emitting cold light, and asked, "Master Van wants to commit suicide, or does he need to take action? After all, Van Nhat Tan is also an old gangster." Hearing that, he immediately clasped his hands and bowed. The old man really had no eyes. He didn't expect the young knight to be someone with such a deep hatred. Kim Phi coldly interrupted, "Van Trang Master doesn't need to say anything unnecessary. I would like to ask, does Trang Trang want to kill himself or let him do it?" Van Nhat Tan's expression darkened. If the young knight does not have a close relationship with Phi Long Mountain Site, the old man advises the young knight not to confront them. Otherwise, this Thiat Hong gang is not an ordinary gang. Young knights should not be provoked. That statement is not an empty threat. Thiat Hong gang is currently the largest force in the dark world. Even Nam Trang and Bac Bao, two new forces that are famous for shaking up the world, must be cautious. Although their martial arts are somewhat higher, they still admit that the Thiat Hong gang is the largest and most powerful faction. Up until now, any swordsman or knight who dared to cause aggression against the Thiat Hong gang would find it difficult to rest in peace afterward. Wherever they went, they would be followed and chased endlessly by the people of this gang. What's more, Thiat Hong Bang has close relations with Nam Trang and Bac Bao. Although outsiders do not know this, Kim Phi clearly understands it. Thuong Quan Hung, the master of Thuong Quan Bao, and Tran Tin, head of Black Sat Page, and his mentor Kim Mong Hung, are both leaders of the Thiat Hong gang's foreign mandarins. After Thuong Quan Hung and Tran Tin became famous in the world, they still maintained their relationship in the underworld. Although secretly arguing, they were polite on the outside, even joining forces in foreign affairs. Therefore, if the aggressor against the Thiat Hong gang does not have outstanding bravery, the Nam Trang and Bac Bao not only will not help, but on the contrary will also find ways to entice them to strengthen their power. Otherwise, no matter how vast the world is, it is difficult to hope for survival. As for Kim Phi, it's different. In this mission, his enemies are not only Thiat Hong gang, but also Nam Trang and Bac Bao. That is the reason why he appeared on the streets. Hearing Van Nhat Tan say that, Kim Phi snorted softly and coldly replied, "Van Nhat Tan, this is the last time I ask you, kill yourself, or let me do it." The two big men standing behind Van Nhat Tan saw that Kim Phi was just a teenager and were less afraid. Hearing him finish speaking, they both shouted loudly at the same time, drew their swords from their backs and rushed forward. Kim Phi said coldly, "Stupid people who don't know how to die." Before he finished speaking, he took a half step back, used Long Feng Quang's magical technique, performed the Long Koi Van Ung stance, and suddenly counterattacked. Van Nhat Tan and his group only saw two strong wind whirling like a tornado on the ground. Van Nhat Tan's expression changed in fright. He quickly grabbed his sword and shouted in a deep voice, "Money, King! Quickly retreat! That's Long Feng double strike." He shouted and rushed to help, but it was too late. Although Tien and Vong realized that the opponent's attack was extremely terrifying, they could not react in time. Thinking they had an opportunity, they simultaneously swung their serrated swords, one left and one right, slashing straight at Kim Phi's head. They felt a terrible force that pushed the two people's hands to the sides, accompanied by Van Nhat Tan's warning echoing, causing them to panic. They quickly used all their strength to pull the serrated sword to protect themselves and then retreated immediately. Suddenly a loud shout rang out, "Lie down!" The pressure from all four sides became heavier and heavier, rushing forward. After two explosive sounds and two pitiful howls, Van Nhat Tan saw Tien and Vong spit out fresh blood, jumped back, hit the wall hard and fell dead on the spot. The wind spread, causing the surrounding tables and chairs to crumble into pieces. Kim Phi only used one strike to kill two men immediately. Van Nhat Tan was not satisfied, swung the Bat K knife and rushed forward to slash his head. Kim Phi did not hesitate, immediately using the long Koi Van Ung stance. His attack was as fast as lightning in just the blink of an eye. He struck 10 palms and kicked 4 consecutively. Van Nhat Tan was frightened by the speed and power of his opponent's palm strike. He quickly threw 3 powerful sword movements before escaping the palm wind. But Kim Phi didn't let him run away easily and continued to rush forward to attack. At that time, the hall was filled with only glittering swords and palms, dazzling everyone's eyes. The men in the village heard the commotion and quickly rushed over, and at the same time, all 4 windows had their bows and crossbows drawn, ready to shoot and kill the enemy. The atmosphere in the hall became more and more tense. In less than 10 rounds, Van Nhat Tan was about to lose the battle. As he fought, he gradually retreated towards the lobby door. Under the torchlight as bright as day, the group of men holding fire in their hands lined up in double rows, looking like winding fire dragons. At this time, Van Nhat Tan was exhausted and retreated step by step towards the main door. Kim Phi suddenly smiled faintly and said, "Well, Van Nhat Tan's talent is just that." Having finished speaking, he increased the force of his kick. The stroke was faster than before, the palm windward, the shadow of the palm obscured the opponent's face. Van Nhat Tan hastily threw out his masterful 8 trigrams blade to defend himself, shouting, "This time I have to risk my life for you." Thanks to the precious Tai Kim Bat K knife and him risking his life, he temporarily restored the balance. At that time, several big men outside the door holding swords sneaked in and waited, intending to help Trang. But the swords and lights were too fierce, they could not intervene to save Van Nhat Tan. Van Nhat Tan had not yet been defeated, but the other group rushed in, making Kim Phi furious, thinking, "Every one of them wants to kill me, so they are all enemies." Thinking so, he was performing the 4th position of Long Feng Song Tuet Chuang, returning dragon leading Feng, and immediately concentrated 8 points of attack power. Raised his 2 palms to strike twice in a row, forcing Van Nhat Tan to take a few steps back to avoid. Taking the opportunity, he pulled the divine sword Kim Huk from its scabbard. A golden light flashed, blinding everyone. The people around were frightened and shouted in unison, "Kim Huk divine sword!" Before the screams ended, there was a kung sound. As soon as the swords touched each other, there was a painful scream. Van Nhat Tan was hit by the sword, his body collapsed in the middle of the hall. The incident happened so suddenly, before everyone could recover, Kim Phi performed the life-stealing Kim Long and Fantasy Tien sword technique. In the hall, there was only a white shadow covered by golden light, like a golden dragon circling around, with an incredibly agile body. Wherever the golden light glided, screams rang out. Those who tried to rush in to rescue all fell down one after another. In just a moment, the hall was empty of anyone strong enough to block the way. The golden dragon shadow rushed out. Outside there were shouts, "Shoot arrows!" Crossbow arrows immediately shot out like rain. Kim Phi looked up and let out a long scream, waving his sword and rushing forward. The sword shadow curled up, his body glided as fast as lightning, circled the hall and spread to the front garden. Where he passed, the sound of fighting gradually subsided. Those who were still alive were seriously injured, others abandoned their weapons in panic and ran away. In just a moment, Van Jia Trang was completely paralyzed. Kim Phi bounced his feet, his body as light as the wind flew to the roof of the tallest building, turned around and shouted, "Blood debt must be paid with blood." Van Nhat Tan's crime is even more serious than that, but we will not pursue him further. You guys quickly leave here. From now on, reform your evil ways. Don't let my efforts to spare your lives today be in vain. Having finished speaking, he lowered himself to the ground, sheathed his sword, picked up a few torches and then used the long Van Dun technique. The white shadow swept across Van Jia Trang. Wherever it passed, fire immediately caught fire. In just a blink of an eye, the mountainside turned into a sea of fire. A white shadow walked away laughing loudly, quickly disappearing into the night. The Thiat Hong gang's foreign official camp Van Jia Trang has since been completely wiped out. The next day, the wanderers spread the news that the divine sword Kim Huk reappeared in the martial arts world. The person holding the sword is a young man in a white shirt with a handsome appearance. As soon as he appeared, the Thiat Hong gang immediately encountered a major disaster. The mountains and equipment were flattened in just one night. The leader of Thiat Hong gang, Tai No, chasing the soul of King Thiet Ta Phong, heard the news and became angry, giving orders throughout the world, whether alive or dead. Dang Kim Phi must be captured to end this feud. At the same time, Nam Trang and Bac Bao also began to pay attention to that name. The righteous and chivalrous world in the world is on the contrary. Everyone hopes to meet Kim Huck, the sword god Dang Kim Phi, this white-shirt teenager with courage greater than the sky. The name Kim Huck, Command Master, quickly spread throughout the world, causing the white-shirt youths walking around the martial arts world to be both respected and exposed to unexpected dangers. From then on, the gypsies arose, and with that stir, a major killing spree officially began. You just finished listening, Volume 1, of the series, Ancient Swordplay. The Divine Palm appears. Please comment your feelings after listening to the story, and don't forget to subscribe to hear the latest stories.